When I picked up my 5-year-old daughter from her grandma's house, I thought the worst part of my day was over. I hadn't even been gone 24 hours. Just one overnight trip. I walked up to the front porch like I always did, expecting to see her running toward me with that wild, excited smile she always wears when I've been gone even a few hours. But instead, she walked out slowly, holding her teddy bear tight, her eyes low. I crouched down and opened my arms. She came in for the hug, but her grip felt different, like she didn't want to let go. We got into the car. I buckled her in, asked if she had fun. She didn't answer at first, just stared out the window. Then she leaned toward me and whispered something that froze every part of me. "Mommy, Grandma said I should never tell you what I saw." I turned in my seat, heart pounding. "Sweetheart, what did you see?" She looked up at me with her big brown eyes, and what she said next made my hands start shaking. I didn't wait. I pulled out my phone and called the police. My name is Hannah. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio. I'm a third-grade teacher at a local public school, and more importantly, I'm a mom to a bright, beautiful 5-year-old girl named Lila. She's my entire world. I lost my husband Ethan 3 years ago in a car accident. He was driving home from work on a rainy night when a truck ran a red light. The police told me he died instantly. I had just put Lila down for a nap when I got the call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. At the time, she was only too young to understand why Daddy never came home. For weeks afterward, she'd still ask when he was coming back. I had no answer, just the same silent hug every time. That's when everything changed. Since then, it's been just the two of us. Our days are filled with bedtime stories, macaroni dinners, and mismatched socks. We go grocery shopping together, brush our teeth to the same song, and every night before bed, she insists I lie beside her until she falls asleep. Some nights I lie there longer, just listening to her breathe. I never realized how quiet a house could feel until I was the only adult in it. Raising a child alone isn't easy. It's terrifying, actually. Every little fever feels like a crisis. Every night I'm late getting home from work, I worry she'll think I've disappeared too. But we manage. She gives me purpose. She gives me strength. And I try every day to give her a life that still feels whole, even if someone is missing from it. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, is Ethan's mom. She lives about 40 minutes away in a rural part of the county, in the old farmhouse where Ethan grew up. After the accident, Eleanor offered help, but it always felt complicated. She's not a warm person. She's polite, but distant. Even with Lila, there's always been this quiet tension between us, like we're both standing on the opposite ends of a cracked bridge, waiting for the other to step first. She never approved of me, not really. She never said it outright, but I saw it in the way she looked at me at Ethan's funeral, like I was the wrong kind of woman for her son, like I had something to prove. Still, she's Lila's grandmother, and I wanted Lila to have a connection to her dad's side of the family. I didn't want my own feelings to get in the way of that, so over the past couple of years, I've let Lila spend a few afternoons at Eleanor's here and there, never overnight, just short visits. I always made sure I was nearby or that it was a holiday or something simple. Lila didn't seem to mind. She never talked much about Grandma afterward, but she never complained either, so I kept the visits occasional and brief. Last month, my school organized a weekend retreat for faculty and staff. It was optional but highly encouraged. They were covering new curriculum changes, and I didn't want to miss it. It meant being away overnight, on just one night, and I didn't have many options. My sister, who usually helps with Lila, was out of town with her husband. My parents live in Florida. That left me with one choice. When I called Eleanor to ask if she could keep Lila overnight, there was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "Of course." "I've been wondering when you'd finally let me keep her for more than 2 hours. That should have been a red flag, but I ignored it. The morning I dropped Lila off, she was her usual bubbly self, bouncing around in her ladybug rain boots, even though it wasn't raining. I packed her favorite snacks, a change of clothes, her stuffed bear named Marbles, and her bedtime storybook. I double-checked her toothbrush. I even wrote out a list of emergency numbers and taped it to her bag. As I handed her things over to Eleanor at the door, I tried to mask the nerves in my smile. She took the bag without looking at me. "Are you sure you have everything she needs?" I asked, half out of instinct, half out of panic. "Hannah, I raised Ethan," she replied sharply. "I think I can manage one night with my granddaughter." I nodded. I kissed Lila on the forehead and hugged her tight. She didn't seem worried. In fact, she was excited to show Grandma how she could read the first few pages of her book all by herself. As I drove off, I told myself I was overthinking it. Just one night. She would be fine. I would be back by noon the next day. It wasn't the first time a mother had to let go a little, and it wouldn't be the last. But deep down, I felt something that wouldn't go away. A tightness in my chest, a tension in my shoulders. I kept telling myself to breathe, that I was being dramatic. The truth is, I didn't realize I was right to be afraid, because by the time I picked her up the next morning, everything I thought I knew about Eleanor and everything I thought I could control was about to fall apart. I arrived at Eleanor's house the next morning around 10 a.m., just as I said I would. The drive felt longer than usual. My stomach was unsettled, not because I expected anything to be wrong, but because I had missed Lila. I kept picturing her face, wondering if she'd had her usual nightlight, if Eleanor remembered to warm her milk before bed, if she had cuddled Marbles like she always did. The house looked quiet. Too quiet. The curtains were drawn and no music or cartoons played inside. Usually, when I came to pick Lila up, I could hear her footsteps running across the wooden floors before I even knocked. I knocked once, then again. After a moment, Eleanor opened the door. She looked tired. Her hair was pinned back loosely, and there was something cold in her eyes, like she hadn't slept or didn't want me there. She didn't invite me in. She just stepped aside and said, "She's in the living room." Lila was sitting on the edge of the couch, hugging her stuffed bear, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked up at me, but she didn't smile. She didn't say my name. That's when the worry I had tried so hard to dismiss came rushing back. I walked over and knelt in front of her. "Hey, baby," I said softly. "Did you have fun?" She nodded, but the movement was barely there. I reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear. She flinched just slightly, like she wasn't used to being touched gently. I looked at Eleanor, who stood watching from the hallway, arms crossed. "We played some games." "She stayed up a little late," Eleanor said flatly. "Probably just tired." I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I just stood up and took Lila's bag, thanked her out of habit, and walked my daughter out to the car. Eleanor didn't follow us outside. Once we were in the car and I had buckled her in, I turned to face her. "Did Grandma take good care of you?" Lila looked out the window. Her voice was barely audible when she said, "Mommy." "Grandma said I should never tell you what I saw." Her words stopped everything. The sound of traffic faded. My pulse thudded in my ears. "What did you see, sweetheart?" She looked at me. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide, in that way kids get when they know they've touched something too big to understand. "There was a girl in the basement," she said. I froze. "What girl?" "She was in a room. Grandma said not to talk to her and that she wasn't real, but she looked real." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Lila kept going, her words spilling out in that hurried way kids talk when they're afraid they'll get in trouble for telling the truth. "She had a blanket, but no bed. She was crying. She said her arm hurt. Grandma told me not to look at her and made me promise not to tell you." My throat felt tight. I forced myself to stay calm for Lila's sake. "What did the girl look like?" "She was older than me, maybe like Olivia from school. Her hair was dirty. She was wearing pajamas, I think. She was scared, Mommy." I sat back in my seat. My fingers hovered over the ignition, then dropped to my lap. I stared at the steering wheel, my brain racing to catch up. Maybe it was a game. Maybe Eleanor had a doll or an old photo. Maybe Lila had misunderstood. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew none of that made sense. Lila had a vivid imagination, yes. But this didn't sound like a fantasy. It was too specific, too detailed, and far too serious to ignore. I called my friend Olivia, not the girl from Lila's school, but my best friend since college. She's a child psychologist. I told her everything in a voice that cracked halfway through. She didn't hesitate. "Hannah, that's not a made-up story. Kids don't lie in that kind of detail. If she's describing pain and fear, that's something she saw. You need to take this seriously." So I did. I drove Lila home and got her settled with some juice and her favorite cartoon. I didn't want her to see how scared I was. I gave her her stuffed bear and told her to sit tight for a bit. Then I went to the kitchen, locked the door behind me, and dialed the police. I don't know if this is an emergency, I began, but my daughter just told me she saw a girl locked in a room in my mother-in-law's basement. The dispatcher asked me to explain everything. I repeated Lila's words exactly. She was quiet for a few seconds, then said she was sending officers to the property immediately. I hung up and stared at the phone in my hand. What if it was real? What if someone was down there right now, alone and hurt? What if my daughter had seen something no child should ever see, and I had almost missed it? That's when the fear turned into something else. Determination. The moment I hung up with the dispatcher, something shifted inside me. Fear was still there, yes, but it was buried beneath something stronger. I was done second-guessing myself. I was done wondering if Eleanor meant well or if I was overreacting. My daughter had come home scared, whispering about a crying girl in a locked basement, and that was enough for me. I stood by the window, phone still in hand, watching the road. I didn't know how long it would take for the officers to reach Eleanor's property. Her house was out past the county line, quiet and tucked between dense woods and long gravel roads. If something was happening there, if someone was hurt, I didn't want to waste another second. I grabbed my keys. Before leaving, I went back into the living room to check on Lila. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor with her teddy bear, watching a cartoon. Her expression had softened, but I could still see the weight of what she had told me. She looked up when I walked in. "Where are you going, Mommy?" I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "Just to pick up something I forgot, sweetheart. I'll be right back. Auntie Olivia is coming to stay with you for a little while." I had already texted Olivia after the police call. She lived 10 minutes away and didn't ask questions when I told her I needed help. She texted back one word: coming. 5 minutes later, Olivia arrived. I told her what Lila had said, again, this time with a shaking voice. Olivia didn't blink. She crouched down and started playing with Lila like it was any normal day. That's the kind of friend she is. Steady, calm, someone who holds the chaos for you when your hands are full. I drove to Eleanor's house with my heart pounding against the steering wheel. The farther I got from town, the more isolated it felt. No sidewalks, no streetlights, just tall trees and silence. I kept thinking about what Lila had said, about the girl with the hurt arm and the crying. I kept picturing her, locked away somewhere in that house I had once sent my daughter into without question. I pulled into the gravel driveway and turned off the engine. I could see Eleanor's car parked where it always was. Her curtains were drawn again, no sound, no movement. The entire house felt still, like it was holding its breath. I grabbed my phone and walked up the front steps. I forced myself to smile as she opened the door. "What are you doing back?" she asked, frowning. "I think Lila left her Teddy's other outfit," I said, keeping my voice light. "The little red one she calls the picnic dress. She gets upset if it's not with her bear." Eleanor didn't move. She narrowed her eyes, studying me. "I didn't see anything else when I cleaned up," she said. "I just want to check her room really quick. Won't take a minute." There was a long pause. Then she stepped back. "Fine. Be quick." I stepped inside. The house was clean but cold. Not physically, emotionally. The air felt heavy, like it carried secrets. I walked straight to the guest room where Lila had stayed. I opened drawers, rummaged through the little backpack I had packed for her, making noise to cover the sound of my footsteps as I moved closer to the back hallway, the one that led to the basement. Eleanor called out, "I said just the room, Hannah." I ignored her. The basement door was closed. I reached for the handle. "Don't open that," she snapped from behind me. Her voice was sharp now, urgent. "I just need to make sure Lila didn't leave anything downstairs." She wasn't down there. My hand stayed on the doorknob. Then why did she tell me she saw someone? Eleanor's eyes darkened. "She's 5. She makes things up." "Not like this." She moved toward me, but I turned quickly and stepped back. "I already called the police," I said. "They're on their way." The look on her face changed. Not panic, not guilt. Something else. Contempt. "You really are just like I thought. Weak, dramatic, always looking for something to blame." "I don't care what you think of me," I said. "If there's someone in that basement, I'm not leaving until I know they're safe." We stared at each other. The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. Red and blue lights flashed against the windows. Two sheriff's deputies stepped out of the cruiser. I opened the door and waved them in. She wouldn't let me see the basement, I told them. The older deputy nodded. We'll handle it from here. I stepped outside, my hands shaking, not from fear anymore, but adrenaline. As I stood on the porch, I could hear their voices inside, Eleanor's raised, then footsteps, then a thud. One of the deputies called out, "We need backup. We've got something." That's when I knew it was real. Lila had told the truth, and somewhere behind that locked door, a child had been waiting for someone to believe her. I stood just outside the front door, my hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. The cool morning air pressed against my skin, but I couldn't feel it. Inside, I heard movement. Voices. One of the officers was calling out something I couldn't fully make out, but I could hear the urgency in his tone. Then I heard it again. A thud. Then the unmistakable sound of metal, clanging, like a latch being forced open. I didn't move from the porch, but every nerve in my body was drawn toward that sound. One of the deputies stepped out a minute later, his face pale and tense. He didn't look at me at first. He turned toward the cruiser and radioed something into his shoulder mic. When he finally looked over, his expression told me more than any words could. "There's a child down there," he said. "A girl. She's alive." I didn't speak. My throat closed. I brought my hand to my mouth and nodded slowly. I didn't want to believe it. I had hoped, in some desperate way, that this would turn out to be a mistake, that Lila had misunderstood, or Eleanor had some strange but explainable reason for keeping a door locked. But no, it was real. They led Eleanor out in handcuffs 10 minutes later. Her face had hardened. She didn't cry or scream. She walked with her chin up like she was the one who had been wronged. She didn't even look at me, not once. As the officers guided her into the back of the cruiser, she muttered something under her breath, but I couldn't hear it. A second patrol car pulled into the driveway. An ambulance followed close behind. Paramedics moved quickly toward the house. I saw her then, the girl. She looked about 10 years old, maybe a little younger. Thin, small for her age. Her face was dirty, her cheeks sunken in. She was wrapped in a blanket, clutching it tightly like it was the only thing tethering her to the moment. Her hair was long, tangled, the ends stuck to her face. One of her arms was in a makeshift sling. She didn't speak. Her eyes were wide and frozen, darting around like she didn't quite trust what was happening. The paramedics walked her gently to the ambulance. I stood back, but she looked right at me for a second. I gave her the smallest smile I could manage, not one of happiness, but of recognition. I wanted her to know someone saw her now, that she wasn't invisible anymore. An officer came to speak with me a few minutes later. He was calm, professional, but you could tell this wasn't something he saw often. He explained that the girl's name was Anya Martinez. She had been reported missing nearly 3 weeks earlier from a nearby town about 40 minutes away. Her photo had been shared on social media, but Eleanor lived so far off the main road, no one thought to check her house. I asked how Eleanor had even found her. He shook his head. "We're still piecing it together," he said, "but we think she may have lured the girl from a public park. Anya was known to wander off occasionally. Her parents said she has a developmental delay and struggles with strangers. Eleanor likely took advantage of that. The idea that someone could take a vulnerable child and hide her like that made my stomach turn. What would she even want with her? I asked. She claims she was protecting her, he said. We think she's been involved with some conspiracy forums online. She believes the child was in danger from her real family. I stood there, stunned. All this time, I thought Eleanor was cold, judgmental, and emotionally distant. I never imagined she was capable of something like this. I had trusted her with my child. And Lila, my daughter, had been right. She had seen something. She had understood the weight of it, even at 5 years old. If she hadn't spoken up, if I had brushed it off as nonsense or childhood imagination, that little girl might still be down there. I called Olivia and asked if I could talk to Lila. When I got home, she was sitting on the couch with marbles in her lap, eating crackers like it was any other Saturday. I sat next to her and pulled her into my arms. I need to tell you something, I said gently. The girl you saw in Grandma's house, the police found her. She's safe now. Lila blinked up at me. She's not in the basement anymore? No, baby, I said. She's not. You helped her. You did a very brave thing telling me. She was quiet for a moment, then she leaned into me and whispered, I was scared to tell you. I know, I said, but you told me anyway. That's what being brave means. That night, after Lila fell asleep, I sat in her room and watched her chest rise and fall with each breath. I kept thinking about Anya, what she must have felt locked away in that dark room waiting for someone to find her, what it meant that the person who saved her was another child, my child. The truth had come from the smallest voice in the room, and it had saved a life. In the weeks that followed, the headlines ran wild. Child found in hidden basement room. Grandmother arrested in missing girl case. Our quiet community became the center of attention. Reporters knocked on my door. Parents from school sent messages. Some offered support. Others wanted details. I ignored most of it. The only thing that mattered to me was keeping Lila safe and giving her the space to heal. She didn't understand everything that had happened, not in the way adults do. But she knew something had been wrong. She knew she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. For a few nights, she woke up crying. Sometimes she'd ask me to leave the hallway light on, even with her nightlight glowing beside her bed. She didn't want to talk about Grandma. I didn't force her. Instead, I sat with her. I held her when she needed it. We read her favorite bedtime books, even when she already knew them by heart. I brought her to play dates, filled her world with comfort, and kept her close. At school, her teacher said she was quieter than usual, but still engaged, still curious, still smiling by the end of the first week. Olivia helped us both. She recommended a therapist who specialized in early childhood trauma. We went together. I didn't want Lila to feel like she was going through it alone. In one of the sessions, Lila said something I'll never forget. She didn't want me to tell, but I knew you would believe me. That was when the tears came. Not the panicked kind I cried in my car that day, or the silent kind I wiped away in the bathroom late at night. These were different. They came from a place of deep, quiet gratitude. I had spent so long worrying I wasn't enough, as a mother, as a protector. After Ethan died, I was constantly afraid that I was failing Lila, that I couldn't give her the security and love she needed. But in that moment, hearing her say she trusted me more than her fear, I realized I had done something right. Eleanor's arrest led to several charges, including kidnapping and unlawful confinement. She pleaded not guilty at first, insisting she had saved Anya, but the evidence was overwhelming. The girl had been locked away in a hidden room behind a false wall in the basement. There were no windows, only a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and a padlock on the door. The sling on her arm was makeshift and untreated. She had been fed enough to stay alive, but barely. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't some misguided act of protection. It was a crime. Anya was reunited with her parents. I met them briefly during the investigation. Her mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She thanked me, over and over, but I didn't feel like the hero. I just listened to my daughter. That's all I did. I believed her, and that had made all the difference. The investigators said Eleanor had been active in online forums filled with conspiracy theories. She believed Anya was part of some larger plot and had convinced herself she was rescuing her from it. It was disturbing, sad, and terrifying all at once. I couldn't reconcile the woman I had known with the woman who had done this. But in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Anya was safe, and Lila was home. I no longer speak to Eleanor. I won't let Lila near her again. There are some things you can't come back from, and while part of me aches for what could have been, a warm, loving grandmother who cared for her granddaughter with joy and kindness, I know now that pretending doesn't protect anyone. One night, a month after it all happened, Lila asked me a question as I tucked her into bed. "Mommy, am I a hero?" I smiled. "You're my hero." She nodded thoughtfully, then pulled marbles under the blanket and closed her eyes. That night, I stayed in her room longer than usual, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. I listened to her breathing, steady and soft. I thought about how easily this story could have ended differently. If she had stayed silent, if I had brushed off her words, if help had come too late. We think of heroes as strong, loud, brave people who rush into danger without blinking. Sometimes, heroes are small. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they clutch a teddy bear and say something that changes everything. I will never forget what Lila taught me, that listening to children is not just about keeping them safe, it's about showing them they matter, their voices matter, their truth matters. And when we listen, really listen, we give them the power to not just be heard, but to be believed. That's how we protect them. That's how we protect each other. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or reminded you how powerful a child's voice can be, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on the people you trust and the ones you choose to listen to. Sometimes, the most important truths come from the quietest corners. If you found this video meaningful, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that listening can save lives. And if you've ever had a moment where a child told you something you almost missed, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories like this one. Stories that matter. Stories that remind us how fragile and strong the human experience can be. Thanks for being here. Stay safe, stay kind, and always, always listen.